Macy Petty, you are a former NCAA volleyball player. You actually played against a trans-identifying male when you were competing. And of course, we're talking right now as the Supreme Court is beginning to hear oral arguments on laws in both West Virginia and Idaho that ban trans-identifying males from competing on women's sports teams. So before we get to the Supreme Court issue, I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal experience with this issue of transgenderism and transgender identifying athletes in female sports, and then where you think the country is as a whole on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for having me. It's quite a pleasure to join you on the show, and thank you to all of your listeners. But yeah, so I am at Concerned Women for America now, but long before I even barely knew what politics were. I was just a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed middle schooler who wanted to play volleyball in college and had that dream and was going to stick to it. And so I did all the things that I knew I had to do. I had to, learn to be faster and increase my vertical and all those kinds of things. And then once I hit high school, it was, all right, you're on the recruiting trail now. Every weekend was spent traveling somewhere else in the country to try and show off in front of college scouts, right? Never got to go to prom or anything like that because you were always trying to impress these college scouts. And at one of these tournaments in particular, I walked up to the court and there were tons of college scouts there. And so I kind of, got nervous. I was like, this is my chance. I have to show them why more than anyone else on the court right now, they want me to be on their team. But then I looked at my opponent because you had to scout out your opponent, right? And I'd never seen an athlete play like this before, at least a female athlete. And I still haven't because turns out that athlete was a man. I quickly figured that out. He was in basketball shorts, played a different game than any of us did. And so this was back in 2018. We were all so confused. This was not a debate happening on a national stage or anything like that. This was just pure, on its face, cheating. We were all confused. We didn't sign up to be in a co-ed league. And the boys' courts were on the other side of the convention center where, mind you, the nets are over 7 inches higher than ours. So we played the game. We didn't think about any kind of protest or anything like that because surely no one is actually thinking this is true. USA Volleyball just doesn't know that this boy is here cheating. Boy, was I wrong. This was the trajectory that USA Volleyball was going in. And I quickly realized this was not a one-off situation, but the new frontier for women's sports. So I quickly got into advocacy mode, which again, that was nowhere in the plans for me. I wanted to work at an amusement park for the rest of my life. But anyway, so I joined Concerned Women for America, started testifying on this issue back my freshman year of college. So I did end up playing in the NCAA for 4 years and spent every minute of that trying to change the rules from within. So did a lot of appealing to the NCAA itself as a female athlete under their governance, but also trying to pass state laws like those from West Virginia and Idaho to protect their female athletes because, I was still a female athlete under these laws, but also could see what this trajectory would mean for the female athletes of the future, including hopefully, by the grace of God, my future daughters, because I love sports. I loved volleyball. It was a great experience. I can see so many ways that it benefited me and has set me up for what I am today. And so want to preserve that for America's future and our daughters.
So you mentioned, obviously, 2018 is when you first encountered this trans-identifying male who was trying to compete against you, obviously a woman, in sports. Talk about where you think the country is as a whole in 2026, because I think, 2018 to probably 2021, I think this really reached the peak and it was being kind of shoved down, I think, everybody's throats culturally. But it seems like the pendulum is swinging and I think the tide is turning and people are starting to wake up, especially parents, and say, I'm all for being inclusive, whatever that means, and being accepting, but this is something completely different. I don't want to erase women in the name of inclusivity.
Right. In fact, it's just the opposite. This is not progress. This is not inclusion. This is not opportunity. It is the fact antithesis of all of those words. So when I started testifying freshman year of college, I found this organization called Concerned Women for America, which is who I now work for and speak on behalf of. And they had been speaking about this issue for years already. They were 5 years ahead of the curve, ringing the bells in Congress, but they were laughed out of offices. They were humiliated on public stages. Everyone was telling them that they were making this up. No one really believes this. And I had the same experience the first time I testified as a freshman in college. I was testifying in a very conservative state, and they were like, this isn't a real issue. And I was like, well, I'm a female athlete from your state, and this happened to me. It was honestly just too confusing to comprehend that this is something people would actually have to debate. And I think that plagued the country for a little bit, this lie that this wasn't really happening. But Concerned Women for America research shows that over 1,900 times in the US alone, men have stolen gold medals in the women's category. In the women's category, gold medals alone in the United States. Those are some pretty significant limiting factors, but just that scenario has happened over 1,900 times in the US. And so we've seen a big wave. I cannot believe, I wish that I could tell my freshman year self after she was told that she was being dramatic and making this up. She would then be invited to the White House just a couple years later for the president to sign an executive order on this issue. So you're right. For a long time, this trans agenda did kind of capture America because it was running on words that sound so nice and pretty. But then you have the picture of Riley Gaines standing next to Leah Thomas, and it exposed on its face what this is. It is lies, it is cheating, and it is nothing but belittling and harming and offensive to women. And so when that image started crossing the country, people started to see exactly what this trans agenda is, and they want no part of it. Every poll that comes out, it continues to poll well, and we're getting increased support. I'm telling you, I work for a conservative organization, but this is the issue. We work across the aisle more than anything else. We work with radical feminist organizations, with people who have been fighting, we've been fighting against on so many of our issues for years, but this is the one unifying issue because it doesn't take a biologist or whatever our Supreme Court justice wants to think to recognize what a woman is. And so we're really grateful to have those opportunities. But it is still an uphill fight because there is, unfortunately, a lot of money when it comes to the trans agenda, especially when it comes to transing children and getting them dependent on the medical system, but also these actors and phony actors at the NCAA also have a lot of money in their pockets and have some serious control over Congress. Because you think about things like choosing tournament sites, there's a lot of money there, especially when it comes to tourism. So it's an uphill battle, but when it comes to Concerned Women for America, we have the power of prayer and truth on our side. And so we're really grateful for the opportunity to take our case to the court and that they are taking our concerns seriously.
To your point, thankfully, I think this is an issue that there is some broad agreement on, and there are not many of those issues in 2026, but we see people of all kinds of different political stripes and even religious backgrounds banding together on this issue. But as a Christian, you mentioned the power of prayer being so important when it comes to fighting this and tackling this problem. How is your faith factored into your view of this issue?
Yeah, well, I have to be honest. The first time Concerned Women for America asked me to testify on this issue, I said no. And then I hung up the phone and got this deep pit in my stomach and thought I was about to throw up. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I have to call them back. And so I did. And of course, that was the Holy Spirit prompting me to get involved in this fight. And the Lord has been so kind to continue to equip me, not only with opportunities, but the words, the boldness, the community to continue in this fight. And so I would definitely credit that to the Lord. This is not something that I ever expected or would have been able to do on my own. But I will say it has been amazing to just band together at Concerned Women for America. We're a network of Christian women who believe in these issues and see far past the political implications. I am so grateful to live in America and be able to work to influence our laws, but we see this much bigger than politics. This is a spiritual battle. God created us in his image, male and female. And there's something so beautiful about that. And it honestly, the ways that God has created us, it tells the beautiful story of the gospel, the most incredible story ever told. But that is threatening to those who hate God. So they not only want to reject God as the creator, but also the ways that he reveals himself in creation like male and female. So that is definitely emboldening to us. We know that this is not just about sports. This is true at its heart, a spiritual battle, and we are counting it as a great privilege that the Lord would use us in this organization to fight back against the pure evil that is this agenda.
Yeah. Well, as we're speaking right now, the Supreme Court is beginning to hear oral arguments on laws that could ultimately impact at least 29 states. Of course, they're hearing specifically on laws in West Virginia and Idaho, but these will have far-reaching implications with at least, like I said, 27 other states in addition to those two. And you were one of the signatories on an amicus brief that has been sent to the Supreme Court. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's incredible. I signed on that brief. I'd have to look back at the date, but it's got to be at least 3 years ago, back when this case was first budding. And I never would have imagined it would make it all the way to the Supreme Court. But again, I count it as a great honor and blessing. And it's been incredible to see how that brief has expanded since then. When I first signed on it, there was only about 5 or 6 people. And now we've got dozens and dozens of female athletes, Olympians, parents, doctors, so many. And that's just this brief. There's so many more briefs out there from conservatives, from liberals, from doctors, from pastors, from statewide organizations. The support is just unmatched, and it has been beautiful to see this come together. And again, I count it as a great privilege because I can use my voice that the Lord has given me, not just as a Christian woman, not just as a public policy expert, but as a female athlete who has had firsthand experience and long before, it was cool to be on this train or anything like that. Concerned Women for America has been proud to fight on the front lines and file briefs and amplify female athletes' voices. And I truly believe that's how the case got to the Supreme Court that we're getting to hear now. It's so exciting. And like I said, it wasn't that long ago that people were saying this is totally made up, but it's because female athletes have been speaking up and exposing just how deep this corruption runs that the Supreme Court was able to hear this case.
Well, my last question for you, Macy, before we let you go is you travel all around the country. You speak out on this issue. And of course, you speak to plenty of athletes who are in the same spot that you were once in as an NCAA athlete. So as the Supreme Court is starting to hear arguments on this case, what are you hearing from other athletes like you who have been in the same position that you were in, having to compete against a male athlete?
Yeah, there's definitely a spirit of boldness that has come across female athletes, which is beautiful. And I can't help but credit Riley Gaines, who has been our fearless leader for several years now, helping to embolden these women and realize that they have been put in positions of influence, whether that's around their school tables at their middle school or as some of the top elite athletes that our country has to offer. And it's been so cool to see them see that as an opportunity to not just defend their opportunity for fair play, but to defend truth in the public square. Because like I said, this goes far beyond just female athletes, but because female athletes are the ones that the arrows are pointed at, it's a mighty battle for us. And it is a beautiful and unique opportunity for us to defend truth in the public square. And so I would just challenge my fellow female athletes and women out there to not let this opportunity pass by and to try and see where the Lord is leading you to speak boldness into culture and yeah.
Yeah. Well, Macy Petty with Concerned Women for America, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.